Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do chapter 9 of the Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of X Investigations book by Bob Johnson. In this case, having to do with a curious investigation into the idea of some cats, some evil cats actually causing the death of their owner. In fact, looking at some of the information for it ahead of time, it looks like it has to do with some mystical black cats. So that definitely got my mind thinking. It intrigued, in other words, when it came to this particular case. So I'll do the first part here, and then I'll do part 2 afterward. And as always, I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it too, and I love to hear where your own thoughts are as well. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do chapter 9 here, which is titled The Cats Made Her Kill Herself. Obviously that starts out with a catchy title, right? Definitely something involving a hook. So here's essentially what it states. It was one of the most somber calls we had ever received at X Investigations. A cold call client, Alexis, told Savannah that her great aunt, Phyllis, whom she had loved as a mother since she was a child, had recently taken her own life. The 68-year-old woman was not sick, depressed, or financially troubled, typical reasons for someone to commit suicide, but the police had deemed the death a suicide, so that's the way the record read. Alexis sounded teary on the phone, so Savannah listened intently out of respect for the girl's grief, but she was wondering why she was calling the paranormal arm of Vincent's detective agency. X Investigations had a separate phone number, so Savannah thought perhaps Alexis somehow confused the numbers and was seeking our partner organization. Whatever the reason, Savannah was immediately taken by the girl's story. Alexis said she really didn't believe that Phyllis would do such a thing. She was always very happy and she loved hearing from me. There was nothing in the world that would have caused her to do such a terrible thing to herself. My aunt would never kill herself. It's just too bizarre to believe, Alexis said. Alexis went on to explain that Phyllis had lived alone in her Westchester, New York home since the death of her husband Arnold about 2 years before and didn't really want for anything. Arnold had been a bank executive who had done very well in the stock market and had left his wife very well off. Savannah interrupted Alexis to ask, "Do you have a problem that you need a detective to investigate for your concerning your aunt's death?" "A detective? Oh no, I'm calling X Investigations, am I not?" Alexis responded. Savannah answered in the affirmative and slowly explained that we handle cases that are not usual and that deal with the occult and the paranormal. Alexis said, "Oh yes, I know. That's why I called you. You see, I know my aunt didn't kill herself. It was the cats, her evil cats. They're the ones that killed Aunt Phyllis. They made it look like she did it to herself, but they were the cause. I'm sure of it. It was those evil cats. They're black, and I told Aunt Phyllis for many years that black cats were evil, but she told me I was superstitious and that the cats were really magical and not evil at all." Despite Savannah's special psychic abilities and her usually reliable character assessments, she felt that Alexis's plea had some basis in fact, and she listened closely to the cat story. She knew that if she presented the problem as a possible case for us, she better have a good reason. My nut meter went off immediately when Savannah finally told me the detail of Alexis's phone call. We're used to having every kind of crazy asking us for help with the most bizarre circumstances imaginable, but sometimes calls are so out there that my common sense tells me that pursuing them will be nothing more than a waste of time. This seemed like one of those. Cats, black cats that caused an elderly woman to kill herself? Come on, Savannah, we don't have time for these kind of nutball claims. Plus, you said yourself the girl told you the police closed the case as a suicide, which means we'd have to get the coroner's records, police reports, and whatnot just to get the details. And more important, where's the occult angle? What's so paranormal about the case? Did Alexis give you a hint as to why she thought the cats made the old lady kill herself? Or is there some kind of inheritance deal going on here? Maybe she got aced out of some money, so she wants people to think the old gal was loony so they could reopen the case and her will, I said. Savannah and I discussed the merit of the case at the end of the day while straightening out some long overdue filing. But Robert, the girl sounded so troubled and sincere. I feel that there may be something to her story. She told me her aunt's story about the cats and that her aunt was becoming obsessed with what they wanted. She first gave them expensive food and did crazy things like buy them special beds and their own TVs. So that's not a problem. There are many, many people who spoil their pets and buy them all kinds of ridiculously expensive things, I said. Look at all the rich people's pets that we see on those lifestyle shows. I really don't see this warrants us in terms of investigating time on this case, Silvana. But then Silvana mentioned the one piece of evidence that piqued my curiosity. During the phone call, Alexis had played a tape recording that put Silvana over the edge. Although Alexis admitted that her aunt was getting older and perhaps losing some of her mental faculties, when she told her niece that the cats actually spoke to her, Alexis had become truly alarmed. She told Silvana that Phyllis had spent many hours studying the history of cats' magical abilities, from ancient Egyptian culture through medieval times, right up to the present. Phyllis had become a fanatical believer that cats not only possessed supernormal abilities, but were also endowed with spiritual powers and were nothing short of godlike. She would rant for hours about how the cat spoke to her in many different languages and told her of the secrets of the universe and how humans are the inferior species on Earth. She said that cats had instructed her in the preparation of potions and formulas for invisibility, flying, and shape-shifting, and the elderly woman had proof. She had notebooks filled with the recipes and formulas that she would show Alexis whenever her niece visited for afternoon tea. To Alexis's amazement, the instructions were meticulously detailed, containing exotic herbs and odd ingredients like nightshade and snakeskin, and the accompanying ceremonies were in many languages, mostly Latin and a strange language called Enochian, which Alexis found out after some internet research. Of course, Alexis discounted much of what her aunt compiled as the fantasies of a bored, lonely woman and consoled herself by thinking her aunt could simply have copied the writings from her notebooks from library books or to TV. But the one disturbing and eerie action that concerned Alexis most about her aunt's sanity and well-being were the tape-recorded conversations Phyllis claimed were between her and the cats. Just as Silvana was about to end the call, Alexis asked her to please listen to her aunt's recordings. She had found the microtapes along with notebooks and an old piece of leather luggage buried in their aunt's attic. There were some 60 different tapes of about 30 minutes each, all labeled with strange titles like To Make a Dream or From Human Body to Human Body. Some of the tapes were simply labeled Conversation and sufficed with a number. One, however, was labeled Conversation with Tailspring and had a star drawn next to it. Alexis explained that Tailspring was the name of one of her aunt's black cats, the alpha cat and leader of the 9 household felines. Uncle Arnold always complained about Tailspring, primarily because he was the first cat Aunt Phyllis brought into the house about 10 years ago, and also because he seemed to have a mind of his own despite what any human demanded. If Tailspring couldn't make his way out of the house at night to roam because her doors were shut or everyone was asleep, he would knock over lamps or dishes, inevitably breaking something of value. It was strange, but he never ruined anything insignificant. It was always something Aunt Phyllis loved or one of Uncle Arnold's prized model ships or airplanes. Even after Uncle Arnold put all of his models in a special case, Tailspring managed to shake the case against the wall during one of his tantrums about being trapped in the house, causing a model ship to fall and break. They finally installed a cat door in the back of the house, something Uncle Arnold hadn't wanted to do out of fear that rodents would enter, but he had begrudgingly capitulated. Damn it, Green Eyes, a pet name for my aunt, that cat's got to go, he'd say, but he never enforced his demand. No, Uncle Arnold didn't like Tailspring very much, and the more cats that Aunt Phyllis added to the brood, the more upset with them he became, Alexis said. Alexis convinced Silvana to listen to the tape labeled Tailspring, which began innocently enough. Silvana said she could hear Phyllis introducing the conversation and speaking to her cats like any other pet lover would. She recorded the date for posterity and mentioned that Tailspring had something very important to reveal to the world. For the first 5 or 6 minutes, Phyllis spoke about most people's misunderstanding of the true nature and purpose of cats. Silvana told me that there were some rather esoteric comments from Phyllis that one wouldn't expect to hear from a elderly woman, such as references to Madame Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy, a pseudo-religion and philosophy grounded in the belief of super beings who possess secret wisdom and who inhabited the earth long before the emergence of humanity. In this tape's introduction, Phyllis noted that unknown to most of humanity, cats, all felines, are the direct descendants of these secret beings and will inherit the earth through what we erroneously describe as mystical means, but are in fact universal truths humanity is inescapable of understanding. Background sound of the tape, as expected, featured a number of cats meowing and hissing. Savannah still wasn't sold on the validity of Alexis's claim or concerned about what had happened to her aunt until Alexis asked her to listen intently to the next few seconds on the tape. Phyllis began to address the group of cats, and Savannah noticed that, oddly enough, the background cat noises suddenly stopped, as though a speaker at a seminar requested the gathering's attention. Phyllis announced, "Master Tailspring, we who are but flesh in inferior form ask your guidance. Please speak to us in the manner that we can comprehend, and we will do your bidding." What followed next blew Savannah away. Although the tape's quality was poor and sounded like Phyllis had moved the microphone away from the primary source, Savannah said she began to hear what sounded like a muffled human voice that was distinctly not Phyllis's. "I heard low conversation at first, like there were more people in the room than just Phyllis. I then realized that the voices started as cat meows, and somehow they became voices, Robert, like it would sound, meow, meow, my name is blank," like the cat started to talk. "I know that this is crazy talk, but that's what I heard." Once she heard the bizarre tape recording of Phyllis and her aunt and her cats or whoever else was in the room with her, Savannah's amazement at the circumstances convinced her to pitch the case to me. She figured that at the very least we could learn something from those tapes, even if they were doctored frauds. Many of our cases indeed concluded as nothing more than hoaxes or scams, and the more we knew about how paranormal hucksters did their job, the better we'd be at busting them. On the other hand, if we discovered a gem of a real unexplained event, then we'd be far ahead of the field. So it was academic for us to take Alexis's case. And so we made an appointment to meet Alexis at her aunt's house. Phyllis's will bequeathed the house to the cats, and whenever there's such a peculiar request, the legalities are challenged. This case was no exception. Because Alexis had inherited all of Phyllis's capital, the court decided that until the challenge to the cats was settled, Alexis would be named the caretaker of the property. It was more than likely that the house would have to be sold, despite Phyllis's wishes that the cats remain in the house and someone be appointed to care for them. Phyllis noted in her will that the cats would decide who that person would be, but it wasn't quite clear how they were going to manage the choice, other than the 9 black cats would communicate their choice to the chosen person through the method that person would understand. After Phyllis's death, the cats were taken in by a local shelter according to the will's instructions, all except Tailspring, who had suspiciously disappeared. Tailspring was a nocturnal wanderer, but he always returned home by morning, according to Alexis. We accepted her gracious invitation to stay in the house as we conducted our investigation, and so we could get a feel for Phyllis's total environment. It also gave us the opportunity to sharpen Savannah's psychic radar so that she could determine whether there was any ethereal residue of Phyllis that could give us a clue as to the circumstances of her death. When we entered the house, Savannah immediately told me that she knew there was a presence of vibrating energy nearby, and she would pinpoint its location shortly. As Alexis and I spoke about the cats and where they were being held, Savannah zeroed in on that vibe. She took my hand and led me upstairs to Phyllis's bedroom, a neat, well-appointed room, just one would expect from an elderly widow. It was a very large room with a dark maroon carpeting and Victorian-style furniture. The windows were draped in frilly white lace curtains that blocked out most of the hot southern sun. The only thing that was the least bit out of the ordinary was the number of photo frames in the room. Both night tables, Phyllis's dressing table and vanity, and a few wall shelves all displayed photos of the 9 cats. Some single portraits and some pairs were in groups, but what struck me about the photos more than the inordinate number was that each picture was perfectly posed, as though the animals were not real. Photos of pets are usually never so perfectly posed unless professionally done, and then, even then, with very obedient pets. Most house pet photos I've seen feature the animals running, sleeping, or posing with humans, but not these. In each one, the cats looked directly at the photographer and sat still, almost as though they were paintings. Each cat, whether by itself or in a group, looked directly at the camera with a defiant, almost grinning facial expression. It was as though the cats knew something no one else knew, some secret they wouldn't share, and they were arrogantly smug about it. None of the photos included humans, not even Phyllis. I would have thought that a cat lover like her would have at least taken a picture of herself alongside her family feline, but there was no such picture. As I focused on the photos, Savannah sat on the edge of the bed in preparation for meditation. After working a number of cases with Savannah, I knew all of her moves. When a feeling of such paranormal presence becomes overwhelming, she becomes intently aware and weakened by the sensory barrage. She closed her eyes and lowered her head into her hand, ready to receive whatever message was being beamed into her brain. This was a strong vibration coming her way, so I sat down on the bed next to her and held her hand. Her eyes were closed and her head rolled from side to side as her body stiffened. She was squeezing my hand tightly, and I could see beads of sweat break about above her full lips. Just at that point, when I thought she would gyrate off the bed altogether, she became calm and opened her eyes. She looked towards the ceiling and pointed her index finger to the area by the closet door. "It's in the attic, Robert. The presence of the cats is up there behind the door," she said. We called for Alexis and asked permission to open the closet. As we suspected, there was a panel in the ceiling of Phyllis's bedroom that opened into the attic. We quickly pulled down the attic stairs to see what was causing Savannah's psychic disturbance. A cool breeze blew dust down into our faces as I climbed the stairs and yanked on a thin white string to turn on the single 40-watt bulb that lit the attic. Savannah said she could feel what we were looking for and that it was contained. Alexis entered the closet and called up to us that she found her aunt's luggage with the notebooks and the tapes in the attic. "I was already up there and those things were all I found," she said. But Savannah insisted that there was something else in the attic, something much more intense and disturbing than notebooks or tapes. We searched the attic for the better part of an hour, turning over old furniture, looking in boxes of clothes, and flipping through magazines. Night was falling now, and the attic was beginning to grow cold. I felt we had been searching aimlessly for far too long, although I respect Savannah's abilities. I was just about to call it quits for the night when Savannah was suddenly quiet. I couldn't see her clearly in the dim light, so I called her name. Alexis got me a flashlight, which I shined in Savannah's direction. She was sitting in the far corner of the attic with her legs crossed yoga style, her upper torso completely erect and then staring straight ahead. The flashlight beam illuminated the whites of her eyes, and from my standpoint, it looked as though Savannah's head was floating bodiless in the dark. She finally spoke. "Robert, I found what we were looking for." As the words came out of her mouth, both of her hands began to rise, and I could see, even from 20 feet away, the yellow-white form of a complete cat skeleton. Savannah had found the cat remains in a box wedged from behind two 2x4 wooden beams at the front of the attic. Upon inspection of the box, we couldn't find any evidence of a decomposed animal, so we concluded that it hadn't died recently. We thought it had perhaps been buried and exhumed years later, or that Phyllis might have obtained the skeleton from some outside source. Why she had it and what it was doing in her attic was a mystery. And let's go ahead and let's finish that here for part 1. And then I'll finish the rest of the chapter in part 2 in the next video. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, fascinating stuff, right? It started off with the idea that here you have something involving cats that may or may not have done something involving the death of their owner, Aunt Phyllis. But now, here you have a situation involving multiple cats that were apparently alive, like they were, in other words, human-like. Like there was something about them with how they acted, how they communicated, to the point that it creeped out the former husband of Aunt Phyllis. And then, of course, now you had evidence associated with them posing perfectly in front of pictures, again, almost like a human would. And here you had something else involving the communication, the tapes that were presented that showcased the animals, the cats meowing at first and then seemingly now talking, like changing from meow meow into something where they're actually talking like a human would. That's creepy stuff when you think about it. And so it's interesting to see what's going to happen in the next part. How's this going to be explained, and what's it tied to when it came to that decomposed cat, that skeleton cat that was found up there, and whether or not that lead cat as well, the one that's apparently the alpha cat associated with the group, whatever that cat has in terms of its leadership, like why it's there, what's it doing. Tailspring was the name of the cat, what that has to do with the death of Aunt Phyllis. So interesting stuff. Cats are definitely out there when it comes to their nature. Obviously, I have my cat Tum Tum. She's a beautiful cat. I've had her now for, I don't know, 14, 15 years or so. And she's definitely one of a kind, my little baby. And in her case, yeah, cats are absolutely just nothing like nothing else out there. They're not like dogs. They absolutely just live their own life. They happen to tolerate humans, but at the same time, they give so much affection to humans. I'm sure those of you that are cat lovers out there know what I mean. They proclaim their isolation stance, like they love being by themselves, but at the same time, anywhere you go, like anywhere I go in my apartment, the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, anywhere, and there's my Tum Tum following me. Like she has to be around me, and then she has to lay down next to me always. And that's at the same time, if I try to pet her, eventually she'll get to a point where she'll get mad about it, and then want to just be by herself, but not for too long, of course. But yeah, the idea that here you have something else involving cats taking on another mystical stance, that was actually something shared too on that wonderful movie Constantine. If you've seen that one with Keanu Reeves, great movie. There's a great scene on there where he uses a cat to go into the other world, and the way he describes it is cats are already there, like they're half in, half out. They're a great middle ground when it comes to being in the human world, but being in another world altogether. So maybe this chapter alludes to that too. But let me know what you guys think. Post those comments below. Interesting stuff, no? All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.